Welcome to Football Coach's Edge. I'm the coach. This is episode 1, The Edge. The purpose of my channel is to introduce a little known concept that will build a consistently successful football team regardless of your level of talent. This concept is revolutionary to the game of football and will provide you with the ultimate edge over your opponent. In every sport, whether you are a team or individual athlete, you're looking for an edge or advantage over your opponent in 3 main areas. 1, physical training, 2, game planning, and 3, psychological. In the modern game of football, game planning is the most common of these 3. We use video to break down our opponent's strengths and weaknesses and come up with a plan of attack in order to gain that edge. In essence, football has become these mad scientist types of offensive coordinators designing in intricate formations and plays, and defensive coordinators disguising coverages and creating blitz packages. The problem with relying too much on game planning as a way to gain the edge is that it is temporary. What do I mean by that? Simple. Football is a game of adjustments. Opponents will eventually break down what you are doing and come up with an effective countermeasures. You are then left to go back and come up with another game plan. Since there are only so many unique things you can do on the football field, coaches will resurrect old ideas that have been all but forgotten, tweak them a bit, and introduce them as a new concept. This concept will eventually become obsolete once teams adjust to it, and then it is back to tweaking another old idea. So my point is that the game planning in football has become a recycling of old ideas. The winning cycle depends on when you can come up with a new recycled idea until the point that teams adjust to it. Your concept may lead to winning over the course of several seasons, but eventually your opponents will adjust and force you to do the same. Developing consistent success using the game planning method is very difficult. So, how do we develop consistent success? Let me start by saying that the reason for lack of consistency and the need for constant adjustments mainly has to do with the lack of effective blocking and tackling. Watch any football game from high school to college to the NFL, and you will notice the numerous mistakes in blocking and tackling. That is because we don't focus effectively enough on the importance of those 2 areas. Instead, we love drawing up our X's and O's. Now, I'm not saying that game planning is unnecessary. Quite the contrary. It is and always will be the most important part of the game. However, what I am saying is that we tend to rely on it too much for overall team success. If you understand football, you know that the foundation of success is built on blocking and tackling. Vince Lombardi put it simply when he said that the team that blocks and tackles the best wins. But yet, we don't put the necessary effort into these 2 areas. More on this in a later episode. So, to break this cycle of inconsistent success, my answer to you is you have to think outside the box. You have to try something revolutionary to football that will give you that lasting edge over your opponent. The edge is not going to come from the X's and O's, but rather the Joes. We rely on the physical ability of the players, but the physical training we traditionally use to build up their ability and performance is difficult, time-consuming, and in many cases unsuccessful. Let us take high school, college, and the NFL as an example. In high school football, teams get a cluster of great athletes at certain times and ride these great athletes to winning seasons. However, when these athletes graduate, it may be several more years before another cluster of great athletes comes along. In the meantime, the team falls into a losing cycle. So most high school coaches ride this wave for their entire careers, waiting and hoping for the next cluster of great athletes. In college, they rely on the recruiting class and the transfer portal to deliver these great athletes, and in the NFL, they rely on the draft, trades, and free agency. The problem with college and the NFL is that this process is not always successful. Now, what if I was to tell you that you don't need to ride that losing cycle? What if I was to tell you that you can build a consistently successful program without always waiting for those great athletes to come along? What if I was to tell you of a revolutionary way to take all your athletes, even the average athletes, and make them into consistent top performers in much less time than you could ever imagine? I'm going to show you a simple, easy to follow way of doing this using the psychological edge. You are not going to believe the opportunity that is there for the taking using the psychological concept that I am going to introduce. Fellow coaches, the edge is sports visualization. You want to know the beauty of it? It is not being used to any serious extent in the game of football. The mind is the most powerful part of the body, yet it is the least understood and utilized in football. Where the mind goes, the rest of the body follows. Traditionally, when we use the psychological edge, we attempt to build up our players' confidence while breaking down our opponents. We work to outthink our opponent and confuse him in the process. We also seek to remove fear and doubt in our players and instill that fear and doubt in our opponent. However, we don't do this the correct way. Visualization offers that way. What if I was to tell you that training with visualization can create a dominant blocking and tackling machine that will break down and destroy any opponent at will? What if your game plan could be carried out with minimal player mistakes and thus the need for minimal adjustments? Sounds far-fetched? Perhaps, but isn't it at least worth considering? So who am I, you're probably wondering. I was an assistant high school football coach for 12 years, the last 7 as a defensive coordinator. I walked away from the game in December of 2021. After 2 years away from the game, I wanted back in. So I began to reflect on what I had learned and my shortcomings. I learned that as a football coach, you either evolve or you fail. It has occurred to me that I had not really learned anything new or unique that could set me apart from other coaches. If I want to return as a head coach, not only do I have to improve myself, but I need to bring something different to the table. So I began thinking outside the box. That is when the light bulb came on in my head, my aha moment. I realized that going back as early as age 12, I had this inner pull towards the psychological aspect of sports performance. I found myself occasionally visualizing my performance, whether it was playing baseball, basketball, or football. At the time, it felt more like daydreaming, but looking back, it did help improve my performance because as times it got me into what we called the zone. More on the zone in a later episode. The problem was that I never really reflected at any of this nor took it seriously. As an assistant football coach, I didn't really know how to approach the psychological edge with my players other than giving that arousing pregame speech, because that was what I was always shown as a player. Besides, football was a sport with traditional coaching techniques, so I felt that introducing visualization would only serve to have other coaches laugh it off. Now that I was away from the game, I dove in and began researching the topic of sports visualization, and wow, what I found was eye-opening. I was immediately hooked. My research revolved around 5 authors and some articles on the internet. The first author was Pete Carroll, currently the head coach of the Raiders. I first read Coach Carroll's book when I was coaching, but now I reread his book with a different purpose in mind. Coach Carroll was a proponent of the psychological edge in football. He knew the state of mind that he wanted to get his players to, but he went about it the wrong way. I will talk more about Coach Carroll in later episodes. The other authors were John Wooden, who was the best sports coach that ever lived, a relatively obscure high school hockey coach, John Bacon, and sports psychologists Jordan Platz and Bill Baudry. Bill Baudry became the most influential for me when it came to the field of sports visualization. So what I will present to you in my series of episodes comes from the writings of these 5 authors, interwoven with my personal coaching experience. My goal is to pass on these ideas to head football coaches in an effort to revolutionize the game and hopefully serve as an opportunity for me to get back in the game as a head football coach. So tune in for my series, which will include the following. 1, the case for sports visualization, where I will show you the science and success behind it, along with beginning, intermediary, and advanced football visualization techniques. 2, my team vision and philosophy, where I provide a blueprint for a culture of success that includes visualization. 3, how to embed visualization into the preseason, practices, and pregame, something that has never been done before in the game of football. And 4, using visualization to create consistently effective blocking and tackling. This concludes episode 1, The Edge. Please join me for episode 2, the case for sports visualization. Until then, this is the coach reminding you that the edge lies outside the box.